Hi again folks, how you all doing? Going to do something a wee bit different today. Something people have often asked me or mentioned over the past few years in comments or in emails or when I've spoken to them at exhibitions or whatever, is why I don't use a rolling road. Now, my answer has always been that I just thought there would be too much trouble, too much faff setting them up, and I just didn't think I really needed one. I couldn't really think of a scenario where I needed one bad enough to make me want to buy one. There have been occasions when I've thought, I could do with a rolling road for this, but most of the time it really hasn't entered my head. When I'm testing any movement problems with a locomotive, I always disengage the motor and push it along the track to feel for any problems. And to me, you have to be able to do that, and you can't do that on a rolling road. So I didn't really see any immediate need to use one, and it always kind of puzzled me why so many people had them. And I've got emails from people saying, "Oh, I've got a problem with this locomotive. It runs fine on my rolling road, but it doesn't run well on the layout." And that always, rung a bell with me. Why is that? Why would something run fine on a rolling road but not on a layout? And also, why were people using rolling roads if they weren't into repairing locomotives or whatever? So I decided to get a rolling road with the intention of demonstrating why I don't use one, and to have one for the odd occasion where I do accept it would be useful to use them. Now, I didn't want to get the rolling road and then immediately make a video because that wouldn't be right. It would be a bit disingenuous of me to, buy a rolling road and then start spouting on about why there isn't any point in using them, which isn't true. I'm not saying there isn't any point in using them. But I thought, I don't feel that I've got the authority to talk about a rolling road unless I've actually used one. So I bought one a couple of months ago and decided to use it sort of secretly off camera doing repairs or try and use it. Really just to try and see if my assumptions about them were correct, and or if they revealed themselves to be an invaluable tool that I should have bought years ago. Now, I actually got two rolling roads. I bought this one initially off eBay. It was reasonably cheap, and I liked the idea of a standalone unit rather than separate rollers to place on a bit of track. However, it proved to be a bit unreliable. Sometimes locomotives, especially lighter locomotives, didn't seem to conduct power very well, or if they did, sometimes they actually jumped off the rollers. I just didn't think the rollers were good enough quality. If there's one thing a rolling road needs to be, it's reliable. You don't want any issues with your rolling road getting into the mix when you're trying to diagnose a problem with a locomotive or trying to do whatever it is you're trying to do on the rolling road. You don't want issues with it. To me, at that point, if you do have problems with your rolling road, it's just a hindrance and it's not worth having. So I bought the DTT Concepts 12-axle set. Comes in a rubbish package, but I've since decanted it into this little box. So this one seems to be the best rolling road to get according to everything I've read online, but it does require placing the rollers on a straight track, which to me, seems a bit of a fiddle. But anyway, I tested it, and yes, it does work very reliably with any model, which is the main thing you want from a rolling road. So I played around with it when I was doing repairs, not that you've seen me using it. I didn't want to film it and never mentioned it because I knew I'd be making this video. So I didn't want to give you the heads up that I'd sneakily been using a rolling road. So after using it in anger for a while, what are my thoughts? Well, to be perfectly honest, I haven't really changed my mind about them. In all the repairs I tried, only working on an old Hornby Dublo model did I actually find it useful. Putting an old Dublo on the track where I could have it operating stationary was really good for setting the main bearing. you know, it was just way better to do it on the rolling road than on a test track, because on a test track it's very trial and error. You know, you adjust it a wee bit, test that, no, that's not quite right, adjust it a wee bit more, and it can take you a wee bit of time to get it set right. On the rolling road, much easier, because you've just got it operating and you can adjust the bearing. So yeah, it's very good for adjusting the main bearing on a old Hornby Double or a Wren model. But apart from that, I can honestly say I didn't find any actual need to use it whatsoever. To me, it was just, you know, too much of a hassle to set up, and didn't provide any real advantage over just testing it on a piece of test track. As I say, you know, one of the first things I'll do if there's a problem with a locomotive is disengage the motor and push it gently with my finger along a straight of track, because that lets you feel where a problem is in the motion. So, you know, if a locomotive's lurching or clicking or the wheels are locking up or whatever, just gently pushing it is the best thing, you know, the best way to find where the problem is. And you can't do that on a rolling road. And also I found, you know, using the rolling road on a lot of locomotives, you're only turning the powered wheels. So, you know, you're not testing if your bogie wheels, like front bogie, or on a diesel, maybe the unpowered bogie, you're not testing any of that. You can only test those things when the locomotive is actually moving. So, you know, their ability to test a locomotive is limited. I didn't have any electrical issues on any of the models I was working on, and to me that's one thing that a rolling road would be useful for, you know, to keep the locomotive stationary. And, you know, maybe you've got a broken wire or something, you find the broken wire and the motor goes and the wheels turn, and the model's not shooting off, which happens on the test track, and which is quite annoying and potentially dangerous for the model. So yeah, rolling road would be very good for looking for electrical faults. So yeah, most of the time I just felt that, you know, it was going to take too much time to set up the rollers on the track and fiddle about getting the locomotive onto the rollers. You know, in the time it takes me to do that, I could have plonked the locomotive on the test track and tested it. Oh. So yeah, I just didn't see an awful lot of point in using it, to be perfectly honest. So this got me thinking about, you know, are they really worth buying? You know, are they really worth it? What's the point in them? What are people using them for? And are they ever truly essential? You know, are there scenarios where you absolutely need to use a rolling road? Because I've managed for years without one. So I thought, let's see if I can come up with 10 reasons to use a rolling road, and ranking them in order from you know, the least necessary to the most necessary, or even essential. I did think about doing 10 reasons for not using one, but it'd be far too long, and I didn't want to make this video any longer than it probably will be. So for a bit of fun, please don't take this too seriously, just it's a bit of fun. I'm going to give you my 10 reasons why I think people might use a rolling road, or just generally, you know, the reasons why you might want to use a rolling road. Now, I absolutely get that I may have missed something out, that there's maybe some extremely important use for them that I've not picked up on, because I've only been using one on and off for a couple of months. So, you know, if there's something I've missed, please do put it in the comments. This is just my thoughts on it. So here are my 10 reasons why I think you might want to use a rolling road. Number 11, you've got to turn these things up to 11. Fun and interest. So there's no doubt a locomotive sitting on a rolling road working away, especially a steam locomotive with a complex valve gear, there's no doubt it's quite an interesting thing to watch. You know, it's kind of fun. I mean, I've done it. You know, I thought, you know, got my rolling road. I thought, oh right, what is this like? Oh, right, okay, and to me, it was interesting to see how they performed on the rolling road compared to running on the track. And one or two locomotives run perfectly smoothly on the track, no issue whatsoever. Put them on the rolling road and there's a wee bit of a wobble. And I found that very, very interesting. And it just shows you that running a locomotive on a rolling road and running a locomotive on the track are two very different things, I think. Locomotives can behave very differently. So yeah, I just put this in as just a bit of an extra reason, because I genuinely think some people do get them for that reason, just for a bit of fun, just to see the locomotives running. But to me, it's not a reason to buy a rolling road. But if you want to buy one for that, that's entirely up to you. I'm not judging anyone or giving any real opinion on it, other than it's not something I would do. But if you want to buy a rolling road just to watch your locomotives running when stationary, that's absolutely fine. Number 10, testing after servicing. Now, you might think this should be higher up, but to me, testing a locomotive on a rolling road isn't really testing it. Yeah, you're making sure that the motion works and the motor works, etc., but you're not testing it going around any curves or any points. Also, the locomotive doesn't have any momentum, which can make a difference. And if you're not going to test any of those things, you've not fully tested the model. I don't consider a locomotive repaired until it's done a couple of successful laps around my track. And the number of times I've tested a locomotive on my test track and it seems to run fine, and then you put it on the layout and it slows down going through curves, or it derails at points or wherever. So yeah, there's often, after testing on the test track, seems fine, but there's often a bit more work to do. And I think that would be even more so if I was testing it on a rolling road and not on an actual track. So for me personally, it's not something I would ever do. I would never just test a model on a rolling road and consider it repaired. Number 9, diagnosing lurching. So lurching is quite a common problem with locomotives, and by lurching I mean, it's running kind of jerkily. It's lurching. And again, the first thing I would do with a lurching locomotive is disengage the motor. Take that out of the equation, push it along the track. Are there any points of resistance? Because lurching can be caused by, maybe the quartering's a tiny little bit out. Maybe one of the crank pins is too tight, or there's a bent rod, or, there's something fouling the motion somewhere. And the best way to find that is just to push the locomotive along the track with the motor disengaged. If you feel nothing at all, if all feels fine, then there's possibly a problem in the gears, or the position of the worm gear can cause lurching if it's too far one way or the other. Now, if you put it on a rolling road, I don't really see what the advantage is, other than you're seeing the mechanism working without the model moving, which can make it easier, and you might spot, that worm gear's too far forward or something. So I'm not saying you can't, all these reasons that I'm giving are reasons to use a rolling node. I'm not saying don't use a rolling node for this, but personally, no, I would just get the test track out, disengage the motor, push it. If not, re-engage the motor and just run it back and forward in the test track, and you'll see it. To me, it's just not worth the time and effort in setting up a rolling road to do that. But, as a last resort, I might do, now that I've got a rolling road, I might go, right, okay, I can't see what's causing this lurching, is stick it on the rolling road. And the advantage to the rolling road is that you can just have it sat there, stationary, everything working, and you can just sit and look at it. And, that'll go for a lot of the reasons that I'm giving here. That is the advantage. So, yeah, it might help with lurching, but yeah, it's not high up on the list for me. Number 8, diagnosing wobbles. Same thing. Occasionally, it will be better to have the locomotive stationary on a rolling road to see what's going on if you've got a wobbling locomotive. Wobbles are a pain in the neck, especially with older models, and sometimes you can't sort them. My old Flying Scotsman from the 1970s wobbled when it was new. It's just the way Hornby made them, and I've found a lot of Hornby models from the 1970s wobble. It's just poor manufacture. And you can't do much about that unless you were to get really serious and start drilling and adding bearings and doing all sorts of stuff. Some models just wobble, but if it's a newer model, it shouldn't wobble. and it can take a bit of investigation to find out what is causing the wobble. Sometimes it's a buckled wheel, sometimes it's the drive axle's got a bit misshapen, or the bearings are loose, or whatever. There can be all sorts of reasons for a wobble. But again, the first thing I would do is disengage the motor, push it, and see if you can feel any issues. And if it doesn't wobble with the motor disengaged, that's immediately telling you it's something to do with the gears. Possibly, you've got to remember when it's the motor's engaged, it's driving the drive gear, so it's that single axle is driving everything else. So it can be very difficult to pinpoint the cause of a wobble, and sticking it on the rolling road could certainly be helpful. And yeah, I can see me, if I get a wobbling locomotive and I can't see the cause otherwise, I might stick on the rolling road just to have a prolonged look at it. So yeah, can be helpful for wobbles. Number 7, diagnosing clicks and kicks. Again, same thing. You can do this on the test track just as well, but yeah, if you can't see it on the test track, then it might be worth setting up the rolling road and seeing what's causing it. But usually clicks and kicks are fairly easy to find. It's usually a crank pin hitting a rod, or a bent rod, something in the valve gears catching. And again, disengage the motor and push it, and you can find it fairly quickly. But yeah, stick it on the rolling road will help you find it as well. But I don't think I would be going to the trouble of setting up the rolling road and putting the locomotive on if a model was clicking or kicking. Kicks are very often a gear issue, a split gear or whatever. And again, if you disengage the motor and push it, and there's no problem, then you're going to be checking the gears. But I would always check the gears anyway, as a matter of course, if a locomotive is kicking, because it's probably the most likely cause is a split gear or foreign object in the gears or something. And I don't really think a rolling road is provides any great advantage in solving the problem. I don't think so anyway, but yeah, it would definitely help. Number 6, running in. Now, running in is something I hear people use the rolling road for quite a lot. And personally, it's always concerned me a little bit for 2 reasons. One, you're only, the locomotive's stationary, and okay, you're going to be bedding in the brushes in the motor and the gears a little bit, but the locomotive's not going to be subjected to the movement in the axles that it'll get going around curves and a layout, and just getting jostled about a wee bit, and the momentum of the locomotive. You're taking all that away just having it sat on a rolling road. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with running in on a rolling road. It's just not something I would do, because I'd be concerned, well, I've got a layout. Why not just run it round the layout for half an hour in each direction? I'm not quite sure why people do that. If they've got a layout with continuous running, why use a rolling road to run in? I don't quite get that one. But if that's what you like to do, then fine. But the other thing that concerns me a little bit about using a rolling road to run in is, if you think what a rolling road is, it's just little bearings on a little shaft. And if you've got a locomotive running for half an hour in each direction, so that's about an hour, and you're doing that, whenever you run a locomotive in, that's quite a bit of stress you're putting on your rolling road. And you could start to get wear in your rollers. I think it's just one of the things that I would worry. Maybe you don't, I don't know, because I've never done it. No, not for any length of time anyway. So I don't know, maybe I'm talking rubbish, but I would be a little bit concerned about wear and tear on my rolling road for running in. To me, a rolling road is something you use just for a very, very short period of time when you're doing something, not have a model just sat there running away at a fairly fast speed. For half an hour on a rolling road, and then in the other direction, no, it's not something I would do. Number 5, making adjustments. So we're getting up here, into number 5. And, as I found when I was doing repairs, making adjustments to an old Hornby Dublo model was much easier on the rolling road. So anything that you need to adjust on a locomotive, especially some of the older ones, I think, will be better done on a rolling road because you've got the locomotive operating but stationary, and that's clearly an advantage for making some kind of adjustment to the model. It's not going to be helpful for adjusting wheel spacing and stuff, and wheel spacing, you need to test the model around curves and stuff, so adjusting wheel spacing, rolling road doesn't come into it. But, making adjustments to Hornby Dublo bearings, maybe position of the worm gear, just some things are going to be better done on the rolling road for sure. And number 4, diagnosing electrical issues. So much the same as making adjustments, it's going to be much better to have a model stationary but under power. It's maybe not running, but it's under power, and as soon as you find the problem wire or a bad solder joint or whatever, the motor will kick in and the wheels will start turning and the locomotive's not going to shoot off. So yeah, looking for electrical issues, much better done on a rolling road, and that will definitely be something I will use a rolling road for in the future. Number 3, diagnosing unwanted noise. So locomotives can make all sorts of weird noises from time to time, and sometimes it can be quite tricky to determine where the noise is coming from. I've seen me a couple of times, the locomotive's going around the track, and I've got my ear down to it. I'm kind of walking around the track with it, trying to determine, is that coming from the back of the locomotive? Is it the front bogie or is it the rear bogie? What's making the noise? So yeah, it's quite difficult to pinpoint the source of those noises when the locomotive is moving. Having it on the rolling road will be really helpful. But I wouldn't be surprised if sometimes a locomotive will make a noise on the layout going around curves, but it won't make a noise on the rolling road. But that in itself helps you diagnose what's going on. If it's only making the noise going around curves, you should hear that on the layout anyway. The noise should stop on the straights. If it's making the noise on the straights as well, then certainly the rolling road will certainly help you pinpoint where the noise is coming from. So again, when I get that problem in the future, I'll definitely be using the rollers for it. Number 2, programming DCC. So this is kind of self-explanatory. If you're into your DCC and you're setting your CV values and messing around with sounds and lights and all the rest of it, it's going to be much better to have the locomotive stationary when you're doing that. Just have it on the rollers and you do all your programming stuff. You can do it on a test track. It's not essential to have the rolling road, but it's going to be much, much better to do it. I do plan to get into working with DCC issues, maybe doing some DCC conversions and stuff like that, or diagnosing problems. But I've not geared up for it yet, and I'm still looking into it. It's a bit of a minefield and very confusing. I've been looking into using Sprog, connecting my computer up, and at the moment I'm just thinking of connecting it up to the test track, and that would allow me to use the rolling road as well. So I don't see me using a dedicated board like some people do. I'll just connect it up to the test track, and that way it can be done either just on the track, or I can put the rollers on and do it that way. But yeah, definitely, if you're into programming DCC, doing it on the rolling road is going to be a lot better. And finally, number 1, constant running evaluation with limited space. So as far as I'm concerned, this is probably the only essential reason for using a rolling road. All the other reasons I've listed, you can get by without a rolling road. I have done for years. You don't really need one, as far as I can tell. If I'm missing something, please let me know. It certainly makes a lot of those things that I've listed an awful lot easier. Diagnosing electrical issues and noises and things like that. Whenever having the locomotive stationary but working is going to be more conducive to solving whatever problem you've got, then a rolling road is a good idea. You know, don't get me wrong. But you can manage without it. But if you don't have continuous running, if you've not got a layout with continuous running, maybe you've only got a little shelf layout, you know, a little end-to-end, or maybe you've got no layout at all. Some people don't. Then a rolling road is the only means to have your locomotives running continuously. As I say, for everything else you can manage without it, but you can't do continuous running on an end-to-end, or if you've not got a layout, and the rolling road is your answer. So to me, that is the number one reason for using a rolling road. But I'm sure there are lots of others, and I'm sure a lot of people will completely disagree with it. A lot of what I've said here and think they're the best thing since sliced bread, and that's absolutely fine. But you know, we all do our own thing, and that's the way it should be. I'm just sharing what I think I'll be using the rolling road for, and how I see them fitting into my processes. You know, I've been trying it the past couple of months, and as I say, you know, most of the time now, I'll just continue doing things the way I've been doing it. Can't be bothered setting the thing up. But there will be occasions when, yeah, you will see me get the rollers out and use it to help solve a problem. You know, I'm not here to offer any advice as such. I'm just, you know, sharing my thoughts on what I think of a rolling road for what I do. The only advice I would give is make sure you get a quality rolling road. Don't buy one of the cheaper ones. It's probably not worth it. And maybe, you know, if you are thinking about buying a rolling road, just have a think about it. Do you really need one? Because I think a lot of people buy them that don't really need one. And, you know, don't waste your money on one if it's something you're not going to get real value out of. But if you want to buy one, go ahead. I'm not saying don't buy one. If even if you think, no, I want to have one anyway, fine. You know, I'm not wanting to, you know, point at people and say, don't buy a rolling road unless you're going to do X, Y, Z. That's not what I'm saying at all. You go ahead and buy a rolling road if you want one. But say I managed for years without one. And now that I have one, I feel a bit more qualified to talk about them, and I will be using them occasionally. There are situations where I definitely will be using them, so you will see them in repairs in my repair videos in the future. Please do let me know in the comments if you've got a rolling road and what you use it for, and if I've missed out any really important use case for them. I'm sure I've probably missed something out. And if there's any other topics you'd like me to talk about and give you my thoughts on in a similar video to this, you know, I'm open to any suggestions for, you know, something different to make videos about. So yeah, let me know if there's anything else you'd like me to blather on about. Okay, folks, I shall catch you later.